Today we're going to be talking about communication in the middle of the field, cardio, and I will be telling a little bit of my own story. Welcome to episode 19 of Run It Straight. Question number 1. I'm 15. I play in the middle as a front rower and lock, or as my coach calls it, a middle. He often says we need to communicate better, but I don't really know what that means because he doesn't say what it is that he wants us to communicate to each other, ? He really frustrates me. Okay. Firstly, before we actually answer the communications question, I would say please don't get frustrated. On coaches, remember the coaches are volunteering their time, yeah? They're not pros. Most don't have much, if any, specific training from professional coaches, but they build their experience over time. So you're saying you're 15. I dare say the coach may have been coaching for a while. He might have been coaching since under fives. Oftentimes you have a coach who takes the team right through, so he might have been coaching for 10 or 7 or 8 or 9 years. Another thing they have, if you're an under 15s, you've probably got a squad of 18 to 20 guys. There's 20 people that they're trying to coach, and they often have an hour and a half twice a week. So it can be very, very hard for them to be able to give, and this is not just for you in general, but this is not just for you specifically, but this is for players in general that are getting frustrated with their coaches. Sometimes it can be very, very hard for them to give player-specific advice to any one individual, given that there's 20 players that are in that squad. And that you've got only an hour and a half twice a week, and then you've got game day that you need to communicate. So oftentimes the coaches might be keeping it general rather than specific. And you know what? Sometimes there are things that that they know that they want you to do, but they're not really that great at articulating it. So he wants you to communicate around the ruck, to communicate with your hooker, things like this, which we'll get into a little bit later. But so to keep it short, it's like you got to communicate. And when you look at good sides, you watch the NRL and you see how much the players are talking all the time. That can be, that's something that he wishes that you guys would do. Okay, so let's any more slack you would like to cut, coaches? Anything that I didn't mention there that for them to remember?
Yeah. Obviously they are volunteering their time. They're not paid.
Yep.
They're doing the best job that they can do.
That's
the
part
best
of
that they know how to.
Yeah, look, and that's part of why we're doing what we're doing here. This is why we tell you guys, please send in your questions so that this kind of thing, we can talk to you a little bit more about your own specific situation, which is why I keep saying be as specific as possible. Yep. Oftentimes, if you're in a team like this, maybe because the coach has got a whole lot of things on his mind, there might be a couple of trainers that are with the side that have been with the side for a while. Maybe you could talk to them. This is one of those occasions. Maybe you talk to, if your dad comes to your football, or your uncle, or your bigger brother, and you're like, look, you know what, I want to get better. Can you watch my game and give me some tips, give me some feedback to get some outside inputs coming in?
And another thing as well is, if you're confused about something that the coach has said because he's made it general, because like you said, there's too many players to give individual explanations to everyone. If you are confused, go up to the coach and ask him what exactly did he mean by it, or what exactly are you after from me in particular in my game. If you approach them directly and ask them the question, they're most likely going to answer you. And if they do fob you off, then that's when you go to
those other people.
Yeah,
but look, don't ask them right in the middle, running a drill, and then you put your hand up and
afterwards.
Yeah.
Afterwards, please.
Afterwards, at a different point in time, or even send him a message. Coach, I'm really trying to get better. And you were talking about communication. With me playing in the middle, what are the kinds of things that it is that you want me communicating, just so I can work on this? I know you're busy, appreciate your help. Usually, if you come at it from that angle, you're going to get a pretty decent response. Now, to communication in the middle. It's funny the question came through, because literally it was that last week on Benji's show that he's got on Fox. But the segment is now, if you literally, actually, I'll get Spiro. Spiro, are you paying attention? Yeah, I'll get Spiro to link it in the show notes. There's like a 5 or a 6 minute section on, they had Pat Carrigan from Brisbane, mic'd up, and who's in the middle, he plays lock, and he's talking the whole time. It's the perfect example of, this is what a guy right at the top of his field who's very, very good at this. This is what he's doing. Go and watch that clip. It's only, 4 or 5 minutes?
Yeah.
They've cut together a bunch of stuff. One of the things you'll notice, though, is he's talking right in the middle of, as the defensive line's moving up, literally during tackles, he's communicating. And and this is something we say all the time, what you need to be able to do that, is you need to be very, very fit. So work on your fitness, number one. It's all well and good to know the things that you want to say, but if you're too gassed to be able to get a word out, then it's not going to be much help to you.
Yeah.
Is that
and
fair?
One of the things that you'll pick up from that video, one of the take-homes is when there is more communication, there is more effort from everyone and everyone's on the same page, so you get a better result. So
Yeah, 100%.
make sure you do watch that video, it's very handy.
It's huge. At any level, like you'll see most teams will have 1 or 2 really good communicators, and if you can add yourself into that, everyone around you becomes better. That's one of those things that it's a net positive that spreads out. Now, a little bit more specific. To start with, break your game up communication-wise into offense and defense. Okay, so attack and defense. So in attack, if you're a middle, obviously a lot of work you're going to be doing is you're going to be doing settlers, you're going to be doing hit-ups, and then you might be running secondaries. It could be a block play or something like that. You need to communicate really well with your half. You need to communicate probably even better with your hooker. So this is something, and I find it frustrating even the amount of times that we tell boys, we go and we watch them play and they're like, I just didn't get into the game. So it might be a front rower or a lock whose job it is to take some of those early hit-ups, to make some meters, find your front, get up, get a quick play the ball. And they stand there and then the ball doesn't come to them and they're like, he just didn't pass it to me. And they stand there, but they stand there with their mouth closed, zipped. They don't say anything. Rather than they push up, and let's say, your hooker's name's Billy. You get in position and say, yeah, Billy, I'm on your left, I'm on your left. If someone else creeps in trying to steal your run, you can use some harsh language and tell them, not so politely, to get out of the damn way. And you say, Billy, I'm on your left. Then you might look to your left and you've got a second rower. Let's say it's Ahmed, and you're like, Ahmed, come with me, go too wide. See that gap? I want you running at that gap. Come with me. So now the hooker's like, he's sweet. As the tackle's going down in front, the guy's about to get up and play the ball. He knows he's going to go to the left. He knows he's going to look for you to hit you with that ball. And now, what did I call the guy? Ahmed? Ahmed is on the left. We've got a lot of Lebanese boys in our academy. Ahmed on the left, he knows, okay, this is my job for this tackle, is I've got to run that line outside with him. So then you take that ball, you keep the ball in 2 hands, not in 1, you run to the line now. Maybe you don't ever intend to give the ball to Ahmed, but the sheer fact that you're running with the ball in 2 hands and you've got support play, it means the defender who's on your outside, if you're at A, that you've got an A defender, but that B defender, instead of rushing in with the A to help crush you, he's now watching this guy. So, it's called keeping the flies off you, so to speak. It means that there's less people, and maybe if you can get a one-on-one, you might be able to break that tackle. You might be able to beat him with footwork or with speed, or best case, the guy doesn't get a dominant tackle because it's one-on-one. You find your front quickly and you get up, creating opportunities for the rest of the team. But you need to communicate with, and again, it could be the hooker, or it could be the half. It could be a 1-pass shift before they hit you, and maybe you're running an X, maybe there's a block play. You might be running an X off the halfback, and his name's Sam. It's like, Sam, I'm hitting that X. Then you look on your inside and you see Ahmed, and he's sitting there having a bludge. It's like, Ahmed, push behind the ruck and push up on that inside. I might give it, push up on the inside. And so now, again, you're running in numbers. So when you come and you take that, you run straight, you dig back, you take that X, you've got the ball in 2 hands, Ahmed's there. Maybe you give a little dummy in the bloke in front, he moves across, a gap might open. Or again, you get a one-on-one tackle. Or maybe they both come in, you pop that little ball. That's how you need to communicate in attack. Anything else in attack that I'm not mentioning?
Attack, just know what set play that you're running. Communicate to your hooker, halfback. Just make sure you're aware and the players around you are aware of what your intentions are, what you're actually going to do.
If they've called a block play, whatever name it is that you have for that, make sure if the halfback's got it and you're running it and you're coming from behind, you're actually going to get the guy running the block who's should be ready to take the pass at all times, but let's say he knows he's not going to. Make sure he knows where that is, and if you tell him push up, you're too deep, or come back, you're not deep enough. Communicate and talk so when you run it well.
But it does also help in attacking perspective, knowing which line you're running and telling the person that's giving you the ball which line you're running.
Yep.
So who you're running at, which hole you're running into.
Yep.
Because they can create that gap. They can make it a bit bigger for you, or you just grab the ball and run nice and hard, so you know where you're going.
Yeah, there's a big difference between that and then standing there as the A attacker and waiting for the dummy half to putt and then just sprinting onto the ball mindlessly. Okay, that's dumb football. We want to play smart football. Defensively, talk to the man on your left, talk to the man on your right, look at what the attack is doing. And you see, if they're calling plays, then make sure you talk, look, it looks like they're running a block. Make sure you get that lead. I've got the guy coming back on the inside. Whatever it is. If the ball, a big thing that you see in junior football is once the ball goes 1 or 2 passes wide, the defenders just stand there and they even start retreating rather than pushing and pushing and pushing across. And oftentimes it's push left, push left, push left. You've got to talk to the guy. If you said you're a middle, so if you're going to have either outside, you might have your lock outside of you, or you might have your second rower outside of you, and you've got to tell them keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing, so that you can come across. If they have a backline movement and then the winger or the centre cuts back on the inside, he's usually going to run into the gap where those lazy inside defenders haven't pushed across. I mean, I've done it in reps, you've done it in reps. How often do you work on defence and about constantly pushing across to cover your inside man? Because if everyone pushes across, there's no gaps. And if you're saying that to him, push, push, push. Hopefully, he's going to start to communicate to it might be the half or the 5'8" who's outside him. Push, 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 and the whole line shifts. Okay, so don't sit there and wait for someone else to do it. You need to do it yourself. What else?
Defense.
Yeah. Line speed.
Yeah, line speed. So come with me. Get the player up with you. So everyone goes through fatigue in the game.
Yep.
But if you turn to the player next to you and you say, Ahmed, come with me. He's most likely going to come with you and not be like, don't worry about it. So he will go with you, the intensity will be higher, and you'll be able to make a dominant tackle.
Yeah, don't just be a hero and shoot up out of the line yourself. You even say to him, let's say that it's a 1 out and they've got a front row who's a dominant front row who's going like, here he is, let's put a shot, get up with me. You look to the guy on your left, the guy on your right, let's go. This is him, let's rush off that line. And all 3 of you sprint up together. As opposed to you just going up as hard as you can, he puts some footwork and he runs right past you. And you had every intention to put a shot on him, but you've gone up hard and he's got options to the left and to the right, a bit of footwork and he beats you and you miss. Rather than if you talk to him, everyone moves up, he's like, there's nowhere to go, he just runs straight into you. Then you can actually put a shot on him.
And when you're actually in the tackle, talk which way you're pulling the player down,
yep.
Who's low, who's high, and then talk about who's peeling off first as well. So
yep.
When you talk about a dominant tackle, it's first contact, one high, one low.
If you're up high, someone else is down low,
yep.
and you tell them, roll, I got it, get back to the line, and then you pull off last, and then that bloke's, he's just got another second and a half to get back into position. Use your mouth. Watch the video. The video actually gave a really good example of a lot of the things that we're talking about. Not all of it, but a lot of it. Yeah?
Perfect.
Yeah, okay. All right, next question. Question number 2. Should I do steady state cardio or high intensity? So again, this is one of those questions where I would say, please give us some specific details because I don't know if you're 12 or 18. But we will talk about steady state and cardio. I would say, let's just create a scenario and say that it's a 14-year-old, just for argument's sake. Should I do steady state cardio or high intensity? I would say both. Again, without knowing what your current fitness level is. Positives of steady state is it's a great way to build a cardiovascular base, number 1. Number 2, it tends to have a lower injury rate and this is our personal experience, when you give guys much higher intensity cardio training to do, their bodies, if they're not properly prepared for it, they tend to break down. And as much as we do try to get all the boys to do their flexibility and their mobility work, oftentimes the ones that aren't have got imbalances, they've got issues, things are tight in their hips, and then the mechanics start to break down and they get sore, they get this is catching. That doesn't tend to happen as much with steady state. So it's like steady state will get you to a point, and we definitely do advise using it. You are going to need high intensity, you are going to need both. Okay. Another benefit of steady state is there's a lower perceived pain point of entry to it. If we tell someone to go and do 10 hundreds and they've got to be finishing their hundreds in 17 seconds, they'll do 2, then it gets really hard, and then the next 2 will be like 19 seconds, and then the next 2 will be 21 seconds, and then it ends up that they're running them at 30 seconds and it's no longer high intensity. True? Whereas when you tell people to go and do some steady state and look, just get your 20 minutes in or get your 25 minutes in, whatever it happens to be, they're much more inclined to do that than they are to go and put themselves through something extremely painful. This is part of what we do with slowly accustomizing guys to being uncomfortable. Not that you can't be uncomfortable with steady state. in our off season, we do have the boys that are in our elite program. Every Saturday, we do an 8K run, and we make them pretty uncomfortable during that run. But that's part of it, is exposing yourself to it enough that you get used to being uncomfortable. The old saying is to get comfortable being uncomfortable. But yeah, we find there's a greater adherence to steady state than there is to higher intensity, regardless of whether higher intensity might actually be more beneficial. It's not beneficial if they don't do it. So there's the practicalities of the S&C side of things, and then there's the adherence side of things.
Yeah.
Whereas what's better, doing something that has a 10 out of 10 result if you do it, but then none of them do it, or something that has a 7 out of 10 result if you do it, and then most of them do it? We're obviously going to go with the second option.
Just to wrap your head around what we mean by not being able to do high intensity. High intensity, you should feel like you're about to puke. You should be going hard every single set, not just the last two or the first two. Every single set, so 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 intensity. If you don't feel like you need to puke after it, you haven't done high intensity training.
Obviously, as you get fitter, that's not going to happen.
No.
But you're really talking about working at a 9 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10 intensity.
Yeah.
And look, so positive, high intensity. You're going to be training the energy systems that you're using a lot closer to a game environment.
Correct. So you do need to add that into
100%.
training as well. But negative is, if you're not ready for it, your body can start to develop niggles and start to break down. So again, positives of steady state is that entry point to get you ready for high intensity.
And what I would say, to make high intensity more doable, obviously, you need to be doing your strength training, you need to be doing all your mobility stuff, you need to warm up properly, you need to build yourself up to the point where you can do it. But as far as adherence, find a mate. Find a training buddy, someone who can come with it, because, particularly you get a guy there who's got to do the hundreds like we just said, or it could be Malcolm's, or it could be, there's countless numbers of drills, that things where, there's effort for 10, 15, 20 seconds, and then there's a rest period it could be a slightly shorter period of time, and then effort again, and then rest period. The way to keep that intensity up, honestly, is to have the competition of doing it with someone else. So you stick two mates together that are doing it, they're going to push themselves much harder than if they're doing it on their own. Or if you can get a small group together. Those are both much better ways of performing this training that's going to maximize what we want to get out of it. Again, making it more like a game. There's going to be acceleration, deceleration, change of direction involved. It's not just linear stuff, which is obviously what you're getting from steady state. But like we've talked about, it tends to be a much higher injury rate, and people are soft and they don't want to do difficult things. So in answer to your question, should you do one or should you do the other? I would say both, but what percentage of each, it entirely depends.
Yeah, it depends on your situation.
And look, it's not that you can't get injured doing steady state. Of course you can. If you're doing nothing and then you go and you do a ton of running, you'll develop shin splints. You'll develop issues in your calves, in your Achilles, in your feet. You can. There's plenty of ways that you can hurt yourself. This is why, again, to harp on something that we mention all the time, go and get advice from people who know what they're doing. Get qualified S&C coaches to help write out your programs. Don't just wing it. Don't just follow look, this guy's jacked on YouTube, I'll just do what he says. Do what we're saying right now, which is go and find someone who can assess you, look at where you are, look at the specifics of you and your current situation, and then work from there.
Don't just get a flexibility program from someone, actually do it.
Yeah, that's pretty important.
Because flexibility and cardio, that's where you see the breakdown. If someone isn't flexible, then they're most likely going to get more niggles and injuries.
And we say this, like when we were mentioning in our off season when we do our 8K runs, we run 4Ks out, everyone rests, and we wait for the last guy to come in, and then we come back, okay? And what we often find, the first run or two, a whole bunch of guys, my calves, or my quads, or whatever it happens to be. And then we go and we tweak their mobility. We get them to start performing self-massage on their calves, on their quads. Next week you run, and you see the guy who's been stretching his calves every day and has been working on them. He's maybe done 2 or 3 sessions of spending an hour massaging and loosening up his calves. He runs, he's like, yeah, that's amazing. My calves are I feel nothing. And then the other guy who was cramping, he's still cramping in exactly the same spot. And you ask him, you haven't done a single thing, have you? And he drops his head. He's like, no, I haven't done any of this stuff. And it's like, well, the answers are there. The solutions are there to these problems. You've got to implement. You have to execute.
Perfect.
Cool. All right, number 3 is actually from last episode. We had Chris's story and we talked a bit about the academy. My story, which I'll jump into. My story starts off with, almost starts off with Rocky. So if you haven't heard it from me, most of the boys here at some point, I've told them a little bit about it. Always absolutely loved rugby league. Was never, I didn't start playing until like under 10s.
Oh wow.
You started in 5s or 6s?
Yeah.
No, I didn't start until 10s. Came in, absolutely loved the game, watch it on TV, loved going to the game, watching it with Dad, but I wasn't really very good. 10s, 11s, all the way through, still not very good. You know, it was like under 15s, and I was essentially, you've all probably got a player like this in your team. Maybe this is you, so there is hope. The guy who sits on the bench and you put on the wing sort of the last 10 minutes when the result is beyond doubt. Whether you're winning or you're losing, it's like, well, you know, the game's over one way or another, we'll put that guy on because he won't do any damage. That was essentially me. And it was one school holidays, I think it was the winter school holidays, where I was looking for something to do, and Mum took us down to the video store. It was a Video Easy, so showing my age there, where videos were still a thing. We're actually literally not even DVDs, we're talking about VHS videos. We went down to the video store, and Mum pointed out, she said, here, how about this Rocky 2? And I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to watch that. She said, we'll get it. And anyway, we got Rocky 2. We brought that home, I watched it. And then I watched it again. And then I went to Mum and I was like, Mum, this is so good. And she laughed. I said, look, if there's a Rocky 2, that means there has to be a Rocky 1. Can we go back? And so the next day, we go back in. And not only was there a Rocky 1, there was a Rocky 3 and a Rocky 4 and a Rocky 5. So we we hired all those movies. I go home, started watching through and just consuming everything. And the main message that came back from that film was, you know, here was someone who wasn't particularly gifted, and the whole point of it was he was going to train his backside off and he was going to give everything that he could, regardless of the result. If he could get everything that he could and he was still standing, then, you know, as he put it, he would know that he's not some bum from the neighbourhood. And literally that afternoon was when I went for my first run and I started training. I even have, right now, I've got a box at home that has all of my original training programs, which was literally get a piece of paper and a pen. I'd watch what Rocky was doing in the training montage, and I'm like, okay, well, he's running, that's pretty simple. So I'm writing that down. Okay, he's running. What else is he doing? He's doing sit-ups. I've got to do sit-ups. He's doing push-ups. He was doing dumbbell lateral raises. So it's like, okay, I've got to find a way to get some weights to do dumbbell lateral raises. He did, was it in Rocky 2? He's doing these weird squat walking lunge things, which in hindsight are probably not very good for your knees. I started doing them. He had a sledgehammer and he was beating sheets of iron. Now, I didn't have iron or sledgehammer, but we did have a fire, which we used in wintertime to warm the house. And we lived in it was quite a bushy area. So I went and lugged a whole lot of timber, and I would go out so I'd go for a run and then I'd come back and then I'd chop timber with an axe. And then I'd go into the garage and I'd do push-ups and sit-ups and skipping. And I started to build my own sort of routine based around this. I managed to find an uncle who had a boxing bag in his garage that was sort of sitting under shelving in oil, and it was feral and it had been there for 10 years. And we literally had that, and we had it in the gym here for a while. But I took that home and I started boxing, and I was like, yeah, I'm just going to go hard. One session straight away, blood all over the knuckles. I'm like, okay, that's a bad idea. I didn't have anything to get wraps, raided the first aid kit to get bandages until Mum found out like 2 weeks later, and they were all blood soaked too, and then I got in trouble for that. So I managed to get some work during school holidays to buy some gloves, and I bought a speedball, which has no relevance at all to rugby league, but Rocky was doing it, so I had to do it. I got a floor-to-ceiling ball, again, not rugby league, but Rocky was doing it in Rocky 3 when he's training to beat Clubber Lang, so I went out and I got one of those. I went and got some from a building site. There was some poles, and I cut them into like agility poles, and I started to go in and out. I started to expand my training regime to things that they didn't have in Rocky. There was no internet back then, again showing the age, so I went to the library and I'd borrow like fitness books, bodybuilding magazines, although again the library didn't have a whole lot of those because it's usually full of nerds, not something they're particularly interested in. And I started to, okay, so this is what I need to eat. There was the first fitness book that I got was George Daldry, who He was a World War II veteran. He was a prisoner of war with the Japanese. He went through a whole lot of stuff over there. When he came back, he started to train the Australian Rugby League team and whatnot, got really into fitness. Anyway, he wrote a book. That's where a lot of my first dietary advice, not particularly good advice, but that's where that came from. Anyway, so I completely saturated myself in this and started training my backside off. I did get a lot of injuries because I didn't really know what I was doing. Hence, like last week, Chris and I talked about giving people the knowledge that we've got now. I wish I'd had someone like us telling me what to do back then, but I didn't. And I went from the kid who played 5-10 minutes on the wing. At the end of the game, when it was over, the next year, I came second in like the school cross country. I made the athletics team. I got most improved in the touch. I got most improved in rugby league, and I moved from the wings into the forwards, into playing second row. And a whole host of things all started to happen. And this was, and I basically see it, right, so I have zero talent evidenced by where I was before. I start putting all this work in, and all of a sudden I'm starting to beat all these talented kids. Guys that were absolute guns with school footy, with club footy, at under 14s and under 15s. By under 18s, they were like way back there, and I was miles in front of what those guys were, and I was completely shocked. I remember the first game I played after I'd been training for about 9 months. It was a school game. We had a trial game, and I was in the middle, and it took a hit up, threw a dummy. Someone actually fell for it. A gap opened up, and I ran through, and the fullback tackled me, and I've reached out and scored a try, and all these people are running over to me, and I couldn't believe. I'm like, wow, they're actually coming to me. I'm usually the guy who runs from miles on the other side to pat someone on the back and then go back again. Like, just to put in perspective again, I was playing at under 14s, and I'd sit on the bench and I'd pick up dirt and rub it on my knees, so when I go home, my dad might actually think I did something in the game. That's how bad it was. That was the change that went from here to here. And that was without me really having a clue what I was doing. And so, went through, made the Parramatta SG Ball the summer squad, and we went and trained, and that was a whole nother level of eye-opening for me for the ability of some of the other players around it. Didn't end up making the final squad, got cut. Still kept training, kept playing club. I was at St John's actually by that point. I think I started off at All Saints, Liverpool, went to Chippy Norton when they were there for a while, went to Moorebank, and then ended up at St John's. Anyway, I didn't quit. I kept training, and I was 20 or 21 when I ended up going to an open trial at Newtown Jets. They had, it's called Jim Beam, but essentially what Ron Massey is, they had basically walk-in open trials. There was, like 100 guys. And I went, trialed there, made the squad, and then they had reserve grade and New South Wales Cup, as it's called now, and they had, it was Jim Beam, but Ron Massey as it's called now. And finally got to the point where things were progressing, where it felt like I belonged, so to speak, throughout that whole journey. Now, unfortunately for me, it is what it is. Life gets in the way. It's going to go in other directions. I'd been told by the coach, playing New South Wales Cup this week. Brilliant. At work that week, I was working at a Liquorland store. Part of our job was the truck would come in, they'd unload crates and crates of everything that a bottle shop sells, but it was crates of beer, come down a conveyor belt. You'd throw the beer 5, 6, 7 meters, catch it, stuck it in a corner, and in the process of twisting to catch a thing, my back went. L4, L5 disc bulge. There was an L3, L4 disc bulge as well. Got so bad, and that ended my season. I played one, or tried to play one game. That really didn't work. And then I went from, my playing weight was about 106 kilos. I went down to about 86, 87 kilos. Couldn't put pants on without using a hockey stick. So every morning was a little bit of a challenge because I couldn't bend forward. Anyone who's had a back injury would know about it. And it was about 18 months until I could get myself to the point where I could go for a jog again. So it was a very, very slow recovery. And, I don't particularly have any regrets because it was something that was out of my control. But I guess it's not that it's a regret, but, I wish that I had what is that we've built here when I was at that age. And that was, we were at Fitness First at the time, and Chris came over there, and obviously we thought a lot of the same. We both had the football background. We also loved training, and we thought, wouldn't it be great if we could give young players coming through, if they could benefit from our experience, you know, the things we've done right, the mistakes that we've made, avoid those mistakes, use the knowledge that we've got now to accelerate. Because, you know, the amount of injuries that I got continuously, like I said, that uncle that I got the boxing bag off, it was about 6 months after that he was throwing out one of those old, it's like a barbell bench thing. He didn't even have the barbell. He just had the bench, you know, with the leg extension thing on the end? He had one of those. And he had a big 25 kilo plate, and so I put that on. I stuck that upstairs. It was in front of the TV, and I just sit there and do tons of leg extensions, which was great. I pulled both of my patellas completely out to the side, to the point where I couldn't run for 3 months because I did a lot of damage. Went to the physio. We had to fix that. But you know, it's all of those things that taught me a lot of the lessons that now I'm able to help all these young guys coming through to avoid those same problems through correct training. So there you go, guys. That's a short story about where I've come from. You've got an idea about where he's come from, but essentially at the end of the day, everything that we're doing is to make you the best overall total footballer that you can possibly be, whether it's physical prep, whether it's skill, whether it's on the mental side of things, or even whether it's it's in regards to decision making as far as what junior club to play for, what position to play for at those clubs, or even when you're looking at moving forward into reps, how do we go about maximising your opportunities to get playing time and you know, see how far you can go with your footy. I think that's pretty much us for today.
Yep.
All right, guys, follow us on YouTube, on Instagram. Please send in questions. We really need specificity with those questions. That's the best way for us to be able to help you. And you look, I'm happy to run an hour long one of these if you guys send in enough questions for us that are quality questions that are new questions. If you want to find some, go back into the backlog. There's a lot of, what episode is this, Spiro? 19. Okay, so there's 18 other episodes, and there's a lot of gold, there's a lot of nuggets in there. It's funny. We'll tell some of the boys, oh, have you, and they might watch the latest episode, and then they'll go back and watch some of the other ones, and they're like, oh man, they're actually really good. And it's like, yeah, you know what, they are. There's a lot of value there. So if you have got any questions, go back and have a look, watch some of those older episodes, which are answering, because some of the questions do end up being quite similar.
Yeah.
And we end up repeating ourselves. That's fine. We're happy to do that. But yeah, we will see you in episode 20.